by the autumn of 1839, Lovett was absolved from having to answer that question because he was safely tucked up in jail. Ultimately, at the point where he was released from prison 12 months later, he could answer the question with the luxury of hindsight. So, to summarise once again, Lovett misled posterity into thinking he was consistently and always an opponent of direct political action. He was lying. There were huge differences between him and O'Connor, but up until the late summer of 1839, they were about tactics rather than strategy. They were about the tone and form of Chartist activity. And Lovett, indeed, was fast becoming marginal to Chartism, even as the term Chartism itself entered common circulation. It's very ironic, therefore, that Lovett's courageous decision in the summer of 1839 to put his name to the resolutions of the Chartist Convention in order to protect other members of that body from prosecution created the circumstances in which he was able to fudge his attitude to direct action. He emerged from prison in 1840 untainted by the controversy around the strategy of the so-called Sacred Month, and still more importantly, untainted by the Newport Uprising. While imprisoned, he wrote a book, Chartism, A New Organisation of the People. In this, along with his co-author John Collins, Lovett set out a vision for Chartism that was essentially about education, not agitation. It was the founding text of the so-called New Move. The National Association of the United Kingdom for Promoting the Political and Social Improvement of the People, which Lovett then went on to found, was actually as marginal to Chartism as its title was grandiloquent. It never mustered more than 2 branches, just a few miles apart in central London. In the words of William Linton, a Chartist who greatly admired Lovett, William Lovett was impracticable, and his new association, after obtaining a few hundred members, dwindled into a debating club, and its hall became a dancing academy, let occasionally for unobjectionable public meetings. That's a pretty damning obituary. Only a blinkered insistence upon the supposed leadership struggle between O'Connor and Lovett has made the National Association seem important. It was, in fact, irrelevant to Chartism. The New Move itself, on the other hand, cannot be dismissed as irrelevant, if only because early in 1841, O'Connor, as you probably know, made rejecting it a test of loyalty to what he saw as the essence of Chartism. And let's be honest here, that necessarily included his leadership of the movement. I referred just now to the profound strategic dilemma that Chartists confronted in 1839. From the following year, the movement was understandably preoccupied with seeking out alternatives to the politics of direct action. For Lovett, as we've just seen, the alternative was explicitly education. But much more importantly, early in 1841, some 100 or so Chartists, but not Lovett, began to promote temperance, abstinence from alcohol, as a new focal point for reorganising Chartism. They argued it would help improve the condition of working people and also withhold an important source of income in the form of taxation on alcoholic drink from the government. Around the same time, the religious emphasis of the movement, which was never far from the surface, especially in 1838-39, also acquired a new momentum. Collectively, the 3 strands, education, temperance, and religion, were dubbed the New Move. In a series of polemical attacks on the New Move, O'Connor lumped these 3 together with household suffrage. Now, the latter was an entirely unrelated call from moderate middle-class reformers for the vote to be given to the heads of every household. Depending on your point of view, O'Connor was either dishonest or disingenuous or tactically clever and adroit in associating household Chartism with the views of Lovett, temperance Chartism and the Chartist churches. Lovett and his supporters were totally opposed to any dilution of the principle of universal suffrage. So were temperance Chartists. So were Christian Chartists. But it's unclear how far those who read O'Connor's thundering weekly letters in the Northern Star would have been aware of this. This is O'Connor. Church Chartism, teetotal Chartism, knowledge Chartism, and household Chartism I mean to denounce one and all as a trick, farce, cheat, and humbug. Don't mistake me. I don't object to Chartists being religious, to Chartists being teetotalers, to Chartists thirsting after knowledge, or to Chartists voting out of or living in their own house. No, I approve of all, but I will show you the dangers of establishing 4 different methods of arriving at the same end. It must inevitably split ranks. So the spectre of the new move was an effective device by which O'Connor asserted his continuing authority over Chartism. Even in places where there was a strong tradition of middle-class support for the Chartists, there was also firm support for O'Connor's argument that it was crucial to maintain unity around the central principles of the People's Charter. For example, at Middlesbrough, on Teesside, local Chartists agreed, quote, to abstain from intoxicating liquor and join the Working Men's Library, but not to be led astray by any new move, whether it was commended by real enemies or pretended friends. As far as the Chartists of Middlesbrough are concerned, they are determined to struggle for the Charter and nothing less. In that quotation, not only is there an explicit reference to the new move, there's also a veiled one to Lovett and his supporters, real enemies or pretended friends, and a pure O'Connorite slogan, struggle for the Charter and nothing less. Right, it's time for me to conclude. One of the factors that has long complicated the interpretation of Chartism has been that Lovett and the London Working Men's Association have appeared to be so much more modern, as it were in inverted commas, than O'Connor and torchlit demonstrations on Pennine hillsides and marches through the streets. The sober and measured addresses on political issues that Lovett penned reached out to the world of modern parliamentary social democracy in a way that Fergus's Northern Star letters could never do. Lovett even lived long enough to get himself photographed, while in O'Connor's case, his death in a mental asylum was always an unpromising basis upon which to launch a political reputation extending well into the next century. I suggest we need to be on our guard against, as it were, modernising Chartism too much. We need to be alert to how original sources like Lovett's autobiography come into being, and to be alert to the ways in which historians interpret them. To sum up, one last time, though he undertook the lion's share of drafting the People's Charter, William Lovett was really a marginal figure in the Chartist movement, and after 1840, he was largely an irrelevant one. He was an admirable character in many ways, but when he came to write his own history of his life, he was not above the temptation to present himself retrospectively in the most favourable light. And which of us could resist that? Historians, following the man himself, constructed a place of central importance for Lovett within Chartism that a close examination of the movement, its character and its history cannot sustain. Why? Because historians have inevitably looked at Chartism in the light of events in their own time and their personal understandings of what makes effective action. And partly also because the process of trying to write history is unavoidably dependent upon flawed sources, in the use of which the historian has to be highly selective. So, my very final point, let me urge you to be tough on historians and to be tough on the sources historians use. Lovett himself warned of this in his autobiography, and here at least, I think we should take him seriously. Quote, "Little is found in history that presents a fair and accurate account of the public proceedings of the working classes. For if the Whig and Tory papers of the day ever condescend to notice them, it is rather to garble and distort facts, to magnify faults and follies, and to ridicule their objects and intentions. In consequence of this unjust system, the historians and writers of a future day will have only garbled tales to guide them, as those of past history have, and hence a caricature is often given of the industrious millions than a truthful portrait."